What's up, you guys? Void here. Come back at y'all with another video. I just wanted to talk about something that I just noticed today looking at the Iconic Masters webpage for Wizards of the Coast. Draft like a master. So really what they're doing here is that they are promoting the set as a draftable set, which is just hilarious to me because this is probably one of those sets where you don't want to draft at all unless someone outright buys the whole box and ownership never changes throughout the entire draft. Everybody knows that, hey, this person bought all the cards here. They bought all the packs, all 24 in this booster box. These are all their cards. Why do I say that? Because you always have this problem with sets like Iconic Masters, sets like Eternal Masters, Modern Masters. People will draft for value the majority of the time. Unless they get a completely terrible rare, people are going to draft for value. When you make a set that is specifically made with a higher chance of getting a valuable chase card, you're going to run into that problem more often than not. This is always a problem in draft. This is always one of the things that makes it more frustrating. You'll have a player that... This is another reason why the whole Masterpiece foiling process was just shit altogether, because you would have players that would just drop out of drafts whenever they pulled a Masterpiece and they got a decent rare or a good mythic. They would just drop out because they don't want to give up either of those cards. I can't blame them. That's just poor design on the part of R&D, on the part of Wizards of the Coast. They really didn't think about just the limited environment and what players are going to do when they draft. I don't want to give up a good foil, which is another problem with master sets, is that you get one foil per pack. So you have a chance of getting a really good foil and a really good rare or mythic. So that means that if I were to continue drafting, I would have to give up one of them, which means I'm probably going to drop out. I'm probably just going to leave, run out of that store as quickly as I came there, and take my winnings with me. I don't care about poor sportsmanship, how other people view me after that. I left with a pretty decent value card. Are you telling me that if I pull both a foil Mana Drain and I get like a Flusterstorm as my rare, that I'm suddenly just going to stay there? No, I'm leaving with that pack. And you could probably do that any game store you go to. They'll perfectly understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to save that value. You don't want to give it up in draft. This is always a problem that we have with drafting, but with master sets, it is amplified because you have only 24 packs, which means that ideally, that's 3 packs per player, 8-player drafts are the norm. So unless someone outright buys the whole thing, that's not always going to happen. So the average person that wants to draft Iconic Masters is likely going to pay $30 to get 3 packs. And it's usually going to be set up by the game store, whoever runs that event. So what I did essentially was I went online like I usually do, and I simulated the draft. I used like draftsim.com or whatever the hell the website's called. Just looking through just simulated packs and what picks I would get. I ended up with either white or black the majority of the time. This isn't always the case, but you can't really rely on your rares to really pick where you're going. And one of the big problems with this set is that you have good cards that are rares, cards that you'd be dumb to not draft because you'd be losing $20 to $30 consistently if you don't pick the rares and you draft for playability over drafting for value. So you have the chance of losing a ton of money, and what you would end up with is something that you probably can't play anyway. Like for instance, Flusterstorm. Yeah, you're going to draft it for value because that's a lot of money you'd be losing out if you didn't draft it. But realistically, are you going to be putting it in a 40 card deck and playing it at a draft event or anything like that? No, you're not. So you're obviously just drafting it for the value. So that means that in a 45 card pool, which is what you end up with in draft, if you draft for value, I mean that's three cards at least. 3 cards if you just pick the rares. Maybe more than that, considering if your opponents don't draft for value, they draft for playability, you might end up with more rares. If you draft for value, you are limiting your card pool. That may not seem like that big of a deal, but when you promote this as a set to be drafted, it's kind of misleading because this isn't a good set to draft. It might be for some people, but I guarantee you more often than not, this is going to be a set with many weaknesses and limited. I'm already noticing there's just not enough green, not enough red. Blue's rather weak, but black and white seem to be pretty decent and limited here. That's usually not the case. Usually colors like red and green do pretty well. So I'm not trying to just take a big hot steamy dump on this set before it even comes out, before we have a chance to actually draft it. but just through simulations, just through looking through the whole set, there is just a ton of crap, man. Just a ton of crappy uncommons that really aren't worth picking. And that's not always the case. When you draft a set like Ixalan, one good thing about the current sets, a lot of people complained about value of Amonkhet. I'm one of them. But these sets were very good to draft. They were good and sealed, and just overall in limited, they were pretty decent. They didn't have any big-time chase cards beyond the invocations, but you at least had consistency in the card pool. Narrow cards that typically aren't going to see play, and maybe anything else except for just Commander, these aren't going to be good for the limited environment. But other than that, though, I really like the set in terms of the value that we're getting. I know some people were upset that we didn't get more cards. I mean, there were cards from Portal 3 Kingdoms that they could have reprinted, such as Imperial Seal, Imperial Recruiter, cards like that haven't been reprinted in a long time. All of which would be super welcomed by the community and would have increased, I guess you could say, the namesake of calling it iconic. But Mana Drain is not any less iconic than those cards. Flusterstorm is arguable. I don't think it's iconic at all. It's just a good vintage card. If it got reprinted more often, it probably wouldn't be worth that much anyway, because it was just printed once in the original Commander set, which is already extremely limited in print run. So it's going to go up in value if it wasn't reprinted anyway. But the fact that it is getting reprinted and it's already down to like $50 in value says a lot about the card itself. It's not super spectacular, but a 1-mana counterspell in vintage is still pretty decent. But overall, I mean, the set did give some pretty decent reprints. I don't think we needed another Aether Vial. I don't think the demand for that card is that high. Why not just put it in another Modern Masters set? Mishra's Bauble was an awesome reprinting, though. I love the Kamigawa Dragons, not necessarily iconic, but definitely awesome. And the Praetors were definitely reprintable. I think those were pretty iconic, and they were definitely needed. So I'm not going to say R&D completely fucked up with this set, but from a limited stance, they needed to do a better job if they're going to slap this on their website and say, hey, look, draft like a master. That's very misleading. This isn't like Conspiracy, where you're going to get some valuable reprints, but overall the set is meant to mesh well with itself. You're meant to have a consistent card pool where you're likely going to be able to identify a strategy pretty easily. The harder it is to identify a strategy in limited, overall just the worst experience you're going to have with that set. Now, I'm not an expert on limited. I don't prefer limited over constructed in Commander, but to me it's always interesting to see how they build a set, because if I'm getting these packs, if I'm paying for 15 card booster packs and I'm only really caring about one of them, that's kind of a waste, isn't it? So why not get into limited? Why not focus on the overall consistency of a set, the junk rares, the bulk commons that people are overlooking, and just bulk in general that sees a ton of awesome play in limited that a lot of people in constructed formats overlook. To me, it involves more thinking, more strategy, just more awareness of what the cards you're looking at and what they do, and what is a good value card for limited as a whole. And not enough people really care about this when they open up a pack. They just care about, am I getting the total value that I want for the EV of the set? That matters, it does, but I'm also talking about playability. To me, it's always kind of a waste. If you know that you're not going to get the exact value out of a set, why open that set? You could just buy the cards off a TCG player. So the value of a booster box in general, whether it has a high EV like Iconic Masters, or just Master sets in general, or it's just a regular set like Ixalan where the EV is okay, but you're not guaranteed to make your money back. The reason why you get these is to draft with your friends. I mean, you're not just going to be sitting on a ton of commons and uncommons that you're never going to put in a constructed deck just to call it bulk and put it in a box somewhere. To me, that's kind of a waste. You're going to at least want to draft these once, and what I do is when I'm done with these cards, I look to put them in a cube so that I can draft again and enjoy limited all over again with these cards. I hate when cards just sort of go into this metaphorical graveyard of no return. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. You don't have to agree with me about this, but you do have to accept the fact that Wizards of the Coast are actually promoting this as a draftable set versus just a set people are going to draft for value. I mean, come on. People are not going to pass on cards like Flusterstorm that are not playable in limited, but are playable in vintage and legacy, I mean, they're just not going to pass on it. So you're going to have a very inconsistent card pool when you're done drafting because there's just a ton of value that you can get that has no playability in limited, but it's going to make your wallet a bit bigger. So anyway, guys, you have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.